We're going live in a minute. Hey, everybody. I believe that we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Yes. All right. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're telling you that I don't even know how many anymore, how many community conversations there has been. And it has been so successful. And the Ministers Alliance is we're just so elated. We're just so, there's no words to explain how we have been learning so much with us, with everything that is going on with the cancer survivorship, cancer education, it's just been amazing. And we just been learning so much from our community partners. And we want to thank God for our community partners. I'm sorry, I am in a church atmosphere. This is how it goes. This is how it goes. But we just thank God for the Ministers Alliance. My name is Pastor Pam Bird, and I am the Secretary of the Ministers Alliance. And we have our Pastor Howard Jenkins, who is our president, and we have our Reverend George Foley as our vice president, and we have Pastor Lori Smalls, who is our treasurer. And we have just been, for the last, I'd say since February, we've been having these community conversations, and that we didn't know what to do at first. To be honest, we didn't know, we were just like taking baby steps. But now we got a rhythm going on. And so we just want to thank God. We thank God for our community partners again with RIDO, Rhode Island Department of Health. We have others, United Healthcare, and there are other churches. I can't even name them all. Isn't that something? I should be having something in front of me. But anyway, this has been such a successful conversation throughout the community. We have been to Newport, we have been through our Providence, and now we're trying to extend, so keep us in prayer, that we are trying to extend out to the north and to the east. We're doing east, we're trying to get into East Providence, where I'm from, and just making it to spread the word of cancer. We want to let everyone know that cancer does not have to be a death sentence. We want to educate the community, educate everyone that cancer, if we screen, it can be preventive. It can overcome. We can overcome this. We shall overcome cancer. That's another saying we got to come up. But we just want to say just thank you to everyone. And like I said, our 4 cancers that we are targeting, but yet doing more, is a lung, cervical, breast, and colon cancer. We have had doctors and physicians talk to us and educate us about these cancers. The colon cancer, we learned so much. Colonoscopy, I know nobody don't want to, and they don't want to go through the process, but it is worth it. It is worth your life. It is there to save your life. Screening breast mammograms are there to save our life. I am also a breast cancer survivor. And if I did not have mammograms, because 1 year, and I always say this, you never know what can happen in 1 year. I always had a mammogram every year. 2009 was good, but then 2010 was not good. And so I'm saying, well, I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to diagnose myself. Am I drinking too much water out of the plastic bottle? You know, I was trying to, and you do hear all kinds of stories of what can cause cancer. But you just don't know what cancer cells are in your body. This is why it is important for screening. So this is what our goal is to let the world know about cancer screening and cancer education and prevention. So what we're going to do right now, we have a survivor that we want to let everyone know about her story. Yolanda King.
Well, good evening. So it's good to be here. It's good to really be here. You know, my story started probably in 2014 when I was working for a health care organization in Palm Beach County, Florida, and they provided access to healthcare for indigent population of Palm Beach County. And every year they would have it was a mobile breast cancer screening. And so I started going just, you know, because it was there, it was there, it was available, it was, I could do it. And then when they stopped, I would get the notifications from the hospital that they were affiliated with. Hey, it's time for you to do your mammogram. And so I just kept going, I kept doing it. And then in 2019, you know, I did my usual routine and I got a call and it was, okay, well, we saw something, not sure what it is. Come back, we want to look again. You know, I was like, sure, it's not. Go back, well, it's something, we gotta do a biopsy. You know, and then it just kind of went from there to there. And it, by God's grace and mercy, it was in situ, it was, so it wasn't invasive, it wasn't anything that wasn't curable. My doctor said to me, well, you know, if anybody had to have cancer, they'd want to have your kind of cancer. And I said, okay, all right, but I think just the word cancer itself is scary. And I think my experience was, I mean, I had you know, lumpectomy, I had radiation. I really didn't go through a lot. And I thought, you know, my story isn't much to tell because I have a friend who had stage 4 and went through so many, you know, so much to survive. And I'm thinking, I didn't. But when I think about God's grace and mercy that He allowed me to be in a position where I could get mammograms every year, to have that screening, to have that baseline, so that when something was different, they could see it early and catch it early before it became invasive or something that could have been really, really bad. So I'm grateful and thankful to God that, you know, I'm able to stand here and that's my soapbox to everybody I meet and talk about it. Mammograms, you know, get your screenings, do it because the earlier it's detected, the easier it is, you know, to get treated. I know that there are many different kinds of cancer, breast cancer even too, but just, you know, not waiting until it becomes something that is so hard to treat, not that it can't be treated, because my friend went through 5 years and yet, and thank God she's still alive, she survived, you know, and a lot of surgery and everything, but by God's grace and mercy, she's here. And I think that I just like to say that I'm one of the ones that got early screening. And as a result of that, I'm still here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda. We appreciate your testimony. That's what we call it in church. Your testimony. But you're right. Early detection is the key. And this is why the Ministers Alliance is so avid in discussing, having this community conversation, because we need to talk about it. Another thing that we need to talk about, let's talk about it amongst our families. We don't talk about it amongst our family. I remember back in the day, the cancer was a C word.
Yes.
And also nobody wanted to talk about it because they thought it was catchy. Just if you said cancer, you got it. But that's not, that is just a myth. And we want to get to know the truth about cancer and about cancer cells that are in your body, that it can be treated. Talking about it amongst your families. You never know. I started talking about it when I got it, when I had breast cancer, and then I found out my aunts had it, my cousins had it, and then come to find out the men had prostate cancer, and that's another cancer that we are going to be talking about amongst our men. Men, we understand that you don't like to talk, but you're going to be talking at this community conversation because we need you to talk about the experiences that you have been, to let them know that there is screening and that there is a cure. And that if we catch it early, that's the thing, detecting it early is the key. So we have many literature. If you want us to come to your church, please contact us at the Ministers Alliance of Rhode Island. You can contact us on Facebook, YouTube, I don't know what else, but also through email. We are here on our website. We are here and we can navigate. We can navigate everyone to where you can get screening. And we have plenty of partners that would help us to navigate, to help you to navigate. Even if you don't have insurance, we have somebody here from United Healthcare, and we're gonna have her talk. But right now, we also want to talk about our caregivers. Always, when you are diagnosed, it's always good to bring someone with you. When I was diagnosed, I only heard the word cancer. After that, the doctor sounded like wah, 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 wah. And I looked at him and said, I had this blank look on my face, and the doctor looked at me and said, "You're not getting this." I said, "Oh," I shut down after the word cancer. So then he said, "I'll tell you what, bring somebody with you at the next appointment." I did. My aunt wasn't that good either, because I'm gonna be honest, she wasn't that good too. But then I said, "What did he say?" And then he had to repeat it, and then what we did, we started writing it down. Because it gets overwhelming, but we have a caregiver specialist, a social worker that is going to talk about caregiving. And we have Dana De Alessandro. Did I say it right?
You did actually. I can't say anything with a D. But thank you very much. So I'm Dana. It's a lot easier just to call me Dana. I want to thank, of course, the Ministers Alliance for inviting me to be part of this. This is my second conversation, and what you're doing is so important because, as you said, it stresses the idea of screening. But just getting the word out there, like you said, you hear the word cancer, and everybody, freezes up. Really, I know knowledge is power when it comes to cancer, whether it's knowledge about genetic history, whether it's knowledge about the things that are available to you, knowledge is power. So the more we talk about this, the more we normalize everything that has to do with cancer care, cancer screening, cancer treatment, the more it becomes something that people feel comfortable accessing. And that's the goal. That's going to help us end cancer. So yeah, you did say something, Yolanda, that if we ever talk about survivorship, I want to get back to, and that's this idea that your experience was lesser than, because it's not lesser than. Everybody has their own experience. The diagnosis is the sucker punch. Everything that comes afterwards is different for everyone, but that's the equalizer. So that's a different topic for a different day, but I was glad you mentioned that. So I am here to talk about caregivers and the importance of caregivers in the whole cancer journey. And, as a social worker, when we meet with a newly diagnosed cancer patient, the first question that we ask, and we have a whole bunch of screening questions that we ask, the first thing we ask is, do you have support around you? And, support, Kelly mentioned a really good point, define a caregiver. Supports are very different for people. I think we think about family, first, whether that's a partner, a spouse, a parent, a child, adult child. But a lot of people don't have that around them. So, we do see a lot of different caregivers come in. We see church, affiliates, people that they know the patient from church, and other than that, they really don't have a relationship. But to be supportive of someone who's alone, someone in their church come in. Friends, neighbors, you name it. Anybody who is willing to take on the task of being that support. Because Pastor Pam, as you mentioned, it's exactly what you said, and we see it on people's faces when they're told they have cancer. We usually walk in after the doctor has told them, if they didn't know before they came in, and it is exactly that Charlie Brown, like, wah, 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 teacher. They're not hearing anything. It is just this idea. I mean, I've literally spent an hour talking to patients after they've been diagnosed, and they'll come back 3 weeks later and say, yeah, I never met a social worker. And you're sitting there and you're like, I spent an hour with you. But in all fairness, I don't take it negatively, because I understand that hearing that news really blocks everything out, which makes sense. So when we talk about, and again, in thinking about what I wanted to mention tonight, I realized a lot of what we talk to caregivers about is similar to what we talk to patients about. We always say to people, look, it's your diagnosis, but it impacts the people around you. It impacts your partners, it impacts your children, it impacts your friends, everybody who loves you. It impacts them. And so when we talk about caregivers, I really want people to sort of identify a broader group than just a partner, okay? Because it is a lot of times a lot of people. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a bigger village to help someone get through a cancer diagnosis. So for the people who are providing support, I'm gonna kind of go through a few points that I would like people to be aware of. The idea that you just mentioned, as a patient, it is really important to bring someone with you. We try to tip people off if they have a diagnosis to bring someone with them, ideally to write things down. As I say to people, you're going to get out of here, you're going to look at each other and you're going to say, what did they say about this? What did they say about that? And you might have very different recollections of what that doctor or that provider said. And that's normal. One thing, and we talked about this last time, in this situation, you really have to be your own advocate. If you don't understand something and you need them to go over it 20 times, they go over it 20 times for you. This is about you. You are driving this. You and your family are driving this, not the doctors. Healthcare professionals can be very intimidating. And I think for people who aren't familiar with the healthcare system, it can be a really daunting system. You really have to take to heart this idea. This is about you. You are the one driving this ship. If you don't understand, ask, because it is really important that you are making well-informed decisions, and that means you have to be informed. So be comfortable with asking. So when we talk about caregivers, there's some things that I like to kind of mention. As I mentioned, the patient gets the diagnosis, but the caregiver is really impacted logistically. If it's a family member, it can be housekeeping tasks, it can be caregiving for children or an elderly adult or family member, someone with developmental disabilities that patient has been responsible for, now falls to other people. So people do have to sort of step in and pick up some of the logistical responsibility, but they also have the additional stress of, a lot of the emotional responsibility. I don't mean to be sexist here, but I will be a little sexist. I usually say to women, because I used to work primarily with female patients, women are the ones that kind of drive the bus. And generally when we see someone come in, if the partner is with them or the caregiver is with them, you see this look of dread come over their face when they realize that, whoa, wait a minute, who's going to be organizing things, like all these logistical things that happen during the day, like the kids getting here or there, or meals getting cooked, or laundry getting done. People a lot of times are very equitable, but a lot of times someone realizes they're going to have to really step up and take on a lot of things that they haven't. Sometimes that also means you're going from 2 salaries to 1, depending on what that treatment plan is. So there's always a financial impact, whenever there's a diagnosis, but a lot of times that can really add to the stress, not only of the patient, but of the caregiver. And, keep in mind, I think caregivers are in the, I think, doubly hard position because, especially if you're talking about a spouse or a partner, who do you talk to about the things that bother you? Who do you talk to about the things you're worried about? Usually it's your partner or your spouse. And if that person is sick and you're afraid that person is going to die and leave you, even if they're not going to die, even if they have a really good prognosis, that fear of death creeps in to almost everyone, even if it's just for a second. So I think it's this idea of, I'm afraid that something is going to happen to you, whether it's a male patient or a female patient, no matter who the caregiver is, there's this fear. And it's really hard to talk to the patient and say, I'm scared you're going to die. Because then the patient's thinking, well, the doctor's telling me I'm not going to die. What do you know? What are they telling you? Are they telling you something? And this whole level of anxiety that's unfounded creeps in. So, you're dealing with a very real emotional fear that the person can't share with the patient for very valid reasons. But that doesn't go anywhere. So, that caregiver has to deal with that fear. And if they're internalizing it, that can be really difficult. So I would say the first thing to do, if you know a caregiver, is sort of normalize for them that, it's okay to be afraid. Much like I think, I talked about this when we spoke last time, about the fact that you feel what you feel. And as a patient, you should always feel that whatever you're feeling, whether it's anger, fear, whatever it may be, even if it's what we deem a negative emotion, feel it. It's a feeling. Don't internalize it and keep the stress of keeping that feeling in. I would say the same for a caregiver. Make the caregiver, and I always ask caregivers, do you have people around you that you can talk to? Whether it's your family, your friends, because it is important for that person to be able to talk and voice that fear that they may not feel comfortable voicing to the patient. So again, this idea of being okay and normalizing for people, I think, especially, I'm going to talk about a couple of things caregivers should never say, but one of the things we do say to patients is just keep a positive attitude. It's going to be fine. Just keep it. And that puts a lot of pressure on people to just keep a positive attitude. Let's face it, there's times you don't feel positive. That's okay. So I would say to a caregiver, it's okay. If there are times that you're afraid, if there are times that you're angry at the unfairness, if there are times that you don't know the reason why, and you want to know the reason why, and you never get that answer, it's okay to feel that this is unjust. The tough thing is you don't always get the answer. So you have to figure out how to go on from there. But normalizing for yourself that these feelings are all part of this, I think helps alleviate a lot of stress for both the patient and the caregiver. So that's some of the emotional, some of the emotional impact of that original diagnosis. And I'm talking about a situation where it's likely that the patient is going to live. Okay, so, fortunately, many of the cancers that you're talking about, and again, with the screening and early detection, the survivorship rate is high for a lot of these cancers. Unfortunately, there are cancers that the survivorship rate is not as high. Or, a stage 4 diagnosis is a little bit different. You're looking at a little bit different trajectory of care, prognosis, end of life, things like that are very real and are really, really difficult to even think about, let alone discuss. So one of the things that does come into play, whether the patient is going to live or die, is this idea of grief and loss. Okay. And, again, in breast cancer, I talk to women a lot about the loss of a breast. If you're in GYN cancer, you're talking about cervical cancer or ovarian cancer. A lot of times it's the loss of an ovaries, the ability to have children. If you're talking to a man, different types of fears creep in around different types of cancers. A lot of times there's grief and loss just about that blissful ignorance of never going to get cancer. So there's a lot of grief and loss that comes along with the diagnosis. And it's the same for the caregiver. You might have an impact on physical intimacy if it's a partnered relationship, shared responsibility, as I mentioned, a lot of these things go by the wayside. The heaviness of the illness, any illness brings a weight to the home. brings a weight to people around it, that might not have been there before. So, you know, grieving that loss of sort of like things just being a little less stressful. You know, these are all things that you have to acknowledge as really grief and loss situations. And then the other thing, of course, if you're dealing with a more serious process, is the loss of a future together. You know, I mean, planning for a lifetime and then realizing that that lifetime is going to be significantly shortened. You know, how do you maximize the enjoyment of the time you have? And I mean, you could say that about anybody, right? But certainly when you have a cancer diagnosis that you're dealing with, it's really right in your face. So what do we do? You know, and I'm kind of buzzing through this. Obviously, these are much deeper conversations, but just some things to normalize for people or to be aware of. You know, what can we do? Same thing we tell patients, you know, self-care. Find something you like, find something you enjoy, and do it. And people usually say, you know, I'm caring for a sick partner or a sick family member. I've got all these other things that I'm balancing. I would love to go to a spa every day, but that's not going to happen. And the reality is, you're right. You know, you can't always get out for a walk every day. You can't always go spend time with friends or go out to lunch or do things that may normally bring you joy. You can pray. You can have a cup of coffee in the backyard and watch birds. You can do something for 10 minutes that gives you an ability to feel grounded, whatever that is. And sometimes it's 10, 15 minutes. It's all you need. People who have kids will tell you, you know, I wish I had 15 minutes to take a shower without anybody bothering me. If it's taking a bath or a shower in peace, do that. Whatever it is that gives you a little bit of a mental break, that's really important to find and to do. Respite care. Kelly, you had mentioned this. You know, I think this is something that a lot of people aren't aware of, that there are programs for respite care, but this also comes back to something that I tell patients: learn to ask for help. And this is a really hard thing for people, men and women, really women, but asking for help is hard because it admits vulnerability. And this is a time when we talk about control with people and people lose control of their life, they lose control of their future, they want to control as much as they can. So making it look like they got this helps them feel like they have a sense of control. Fact of the matter is, if you can ease up on yourself and realize that you're controlling this, control what you can control, but everybody needs help. And there's no shame, there's no embarrassment, there's no weakness in asking for help. And I would say, if it is difficult for people, I try to suggest to people, ask for concrete things. You know, say, hey, you know what, it would be really helpful if you could pick up a prescription for me so that I don't have to leave the home. You know, it would be great. It's been really hard to cook dinner. If someone could bring a meal over. Concrete things. Usually people will say things like, oh, you know, let me know anything I can do to help. And then they kind of vaporize. Or you say, oh, no, everything is good. You know, and you know, and people will say, no, you know, I've got this. Keep in mind, if you're saying to people, I'm good, I've got this, they're going to believe you, even if you're not telling the truth. So sometimes we're our own worst enemies, in the sense that, you know, we want to feel like we got this, we tell people we've got this, then we sort of resent that people vaporize, when in fact, they're listening to us. And if we're saying we don't need help, they're going to back away. Don't be afraid to ask for help, even if it's something small. You'll make it easier for yourself to have that become more comfortable for you. And people will say, she or he is willing to accept help. And that's important for everyone, especially a patient or a caregiver. Talked about the staying positive. Okay, so I do have this list of things to avoid, but I want to get to a couple of other things first. Be okay with your emotions. Things to avoid. And a lot of people fall into this. It isn't just caregivers, but one thing I would say, even if you know someone who has a cancer diagnosis and you're not even their caregiver, if you're a friend or an acquaintance, unless you have sat in that chair, and I know a couple of you have, please don't ever say, I know how you feel. I've never sat in that chair. I have been very, very, very careful to never to say, and I have worked with, when I tell you, I've learned so much from the patients and the caregivers that I have had, and the survivors that I have had the privilege to work with over the last 12 years. I learned very early on not to say, I know how you feel, because the fact of the matter is I don't. I can empathize and I've learned a lot, so I can have some idea of what I should and shouldn't say, but I haven't sat in that chair. And unless you've sat in that chair, you don't know the level of anxiety, you don't know the level of fear. And so a lot of times people let it slide, but a couple of times I've heard people say with just cause, you don't know how I feel. Fact of the matter is they're right. So unless you have sat in that chair, be really careful. So I do say to, to partners or to caregivers, I know you care. I know you want to establish empathy. Unless you have had a cancer diagnosis, please don't tell the person you know how they feel, because you don't. You have your own very valid set of fears. You have your own very valid set of emotions, but they're different. So just understand that. You can find, as we were talking about earlier, you can find common ground, but it's not the same. Again, similar, talking patients out of their emotions. I think caregivers, no matter who they are, want the patient to be okay. They want you to survive. They want you to be okay. And we see this a lot in survivorship, this idea that the second you leave your last treatment, your last radiation, or you ring the chemo bell, your hair starts growing back a little and people are like, you're done. Good for you. You rang the bell, you're done. And you're thinking, wow, I don't feel done. I do not feel done. And this is really more survivorship, but as a caregiver, saying to someone, stop worrying about getting cancer back again. You're done with it, is really minimizing, and it really shows a lack of understanding of really the emotional impact of what the person has been through. So telling someone, it kind of goes back to the same idea of talking someone out of their emotions. It is very normal for survivors to be terrified of a recurrence, even if they've had a very early in situ diagnosis that they've been told a million times is never going to spread. That thought is in there. Yes. I joke around with people and I'll say, people will come in after 7 years and they'll say, I have a pain in my big toe. I'm pretty sure I have bone mets. And I'm like, Or, my favorite was a woman came in and she said, I have nose cancer. And I'm like, yeah, there's no such thing as nose cancer. She said, but I've got a pain in my nose. And I'm like, and it turned out it was like, I think she had, I don't know, either a pimple in her nose, but it was a very genuine fear. You can't minimize or ignore that. That is not a silly feeling. That is a genuine fear, and it is based in something very real. So as much as you want the person to be done, as much as you want that patient to be beyond it, understand that it takes a long time. And then I think the last thing I have, that might have been the last thing. Listen to the patient. This is especially important at end of life, but the whole time. One of the toughest situations I have been in, there's two situations that I remember, like they happened yesterday. One was a lovely older woman, and she was in her night. She was this woman was like, she was out mowing her lawn. She was a tough old Italian lady. I could say that, I'm Italian. She was just really feisty and tough. And she had a really bad cancer diagnosis, and she was not going to live. And she had a loving, wonderful family that adored her, respected her as the matriarch of the family, and did not want her to die. And the patient got to a point where she was like, I'm done. I'm done. She couldn't ride her lawnmower anymore. She couldn't do the things she wanted to do because chemo was just killing her. Not killing her physically, but it was just sapping her. And the family said, no, you got to keep going with chemo. You got to keep going with chemo. And finally, it got to a point where we had a family meeting and we said, she's in a place where she wants to be able to enjoy whatever time she has left. So you pushing treatment isn't helping her. And in fact, I think what I've seen a lot with people is they don't want to be viewed as those children that didn't do everything they could for their parent. So pushing treatment, doing everything. Listen to the patient. If the patient doesn't want to do treatment anymore, respect that. Do what you can to make sure that time works for them. That's really important. The other thing is, as we talk about end of life, and you can, as you spread the word to everyone that you should have these conversations well before you ever have a diagnosis. We talk about power of attorney. We talk about end of life preferences. This is your opportunity to have control over the end of your life. And what do you want it to look like? Do you want treatment? You know, do you not want treatment? Do you want to be, and there's no right or wrong. What everybody wants is different, and what everybody wants is right for them. Have those conversations with your family. Because when you're in a crisis situation and you're asked to make decisions, you want to be making the decisions that the patient would want. And that's hard because sometimes it's not what you would want. So it's really important to remember what the patient wants, as being, and to give another sort of silly story, a woman came in once and she said, you know, I have two sisters. She said, I'm very close to one of my sisters, and the other sister I'm not very close to. And we've had a lot of differences over the course of our lives, but I think I'm going to name her my power of attorney and my next of kin. Because I want her to understand how much I love her and how much I value her opinion. So the two of them came in to talk to me about end of life. And luckily, this woman didn't end up dying, because the sister, literally everything the patient wanted, the sister was like, no, you have to do this. No, you can't, I will not sign off on that. No. And so they left, and I called the patient later. I said, you know, maybe we just take this sister to lunch and you get the other sister to be your power of attorney, because you really have to think about what you want and getting the person that's going to feel comfortable doing it, even if they don't necessarily agree with it. And that's a hard conversation, but it's an important conversation. So I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything that you can think of that I should address about caregivers? I kind of buzzed through this. There's a lot more.
Question.
Yeah.
Let's change it over to when the patient receives this diagnosis. The patient automatically thinks of the caregivers, their children,
Of course.
the spouses, or whatever. They don't want to put this load on them.
Absolutely.
So now the caregiver has to talk to the patient to say, we're here.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm trying to
I do,
say?
and yeah, and as a matter of fact, Pastor Pam, that raises a really interesting point, because a lot of times people will come in and they'll say, I don't want to tell anybody in my family. You know, I have a kid that's got an exam, I have a father that's got, you know, kind of, he's older, and he might have a heart attack, you know, very valid concerns, right? You know, I don't want to put this burden on my family or my loved ones. I will tell you that research shows, and there's a lot of articles about this, the best thing you can do is be with children age appropriately honest, and with family honest, because what it does is it gives you validity. It's not an easy conversation to say to someone in your family, I have a cancer diagnosis. Usually it's helped by saying, you know, but the doctors are telling me there's a good prognosis. You know, it is. I mean, there's no question that there's hesitancy and there's concern about the impact that it will have on family members.
Yeah.
But I would endorse, and I don't know if you would agree, but I would absolutely endorse finding a way, finding the timing, carving out a time where people can sit and have a conversation, that it's not just like a passing, oh, by the way, and having that difficult conversation, because as stoic as people think they can be, everybody needs supports going through this.
And that's what I would like to see too, to let that patient know you do need the support.
Right.
And it's okay.
And it's okay.
It's okay
Right.
to have the
And not
support.
only is it okay, it's critical.
Yeah.
It's critical to have that support. Even if it's just someone that you know, if you need to call, you can call. It's not that your support person has to be glued to you all the time.
Right.
But, you know, you get into a position where you're feeling down, it's important to have supports around you. But you talk about children, and I'll tell you, in the 12 years I've been doing this, I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing. So, you know, there's a lot of things I see that are heartbreaking, but I have only cried once. And that was when there was a lovely older woman who came in, and she was nearing the end of life, and she was talking to me, and we would talk every week for about an hour. And she was talking to me, and she said, you know, I'm really ready to die. She said, and I hope I don't get choked up. She said, the only thing that I really regret is I'm not going to see my children grow into the adults, the wonderful adults I know they're going to be. And I lost it. I absolutely just started to cry, because I had children that I could relate to that. I could relate to that heartbreak of what if I couldn't see my children grow up? So, I think as a caregiver, you have to be aware that there are going to be things that are going to be triggering for you.
Yeah.
Whether you're a friend, whether you're a family member, whether you're a partner, there are things that are going to be triggering. And it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry. It allows the patient to cry sometimes. So, I think you raise a great question. I would absolutely, as a professional, encourage a patient to let people know, even if it isn't their if their children live far away and they don't want to, that I would say is going to backfire on them eventually, the kid thing, because kids find out and then they resent that they haven't had a chance to be a caregiver or support their parent or their grandparent the way they felt supported by them. It's not easy, but I do think it's important.
Now, do they have caregiver support?
Yeah.
Where, okay, that patient does not mean to be, but sometimes they're mean.
Oh, they're often mean.
No, I mean, we had,
Sure.
we had a caregiver, tell her story about her taking care of her mom.
Yeah.
And she said her mom called her a ratchet nurse.
Oh, sure.
And so is there something that we can encourage caregivers when they're going through this as well? Because they are really there and that patient is going through
Absolutely.
everything that they're going through. And sometimes they have to let it out. And
They do. You're
it's
right.
mostly the one that's right there.
Who is the lightning rod, right? Who bears the brunt of whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and again, a little bit different, but I will tell you again, being someone who meets with patients, there's a lot of times people are really nasty. They're angry, they're they're yelling at you, they're dismissive, they're snippy. And what I have learned and what most of my former coworkers will tell you is we recognize, and I would say, tell this to caregivers, recognize that is fear and it's anger. Okay. And, I don't know if that's going to make it any less pointed. I don't know if it's going to hurt me less, but sometimes, we talk about the why, and sometimes people are like, geez, all I'm trying to do is help.
Yeah.
Understand that when you're hearing these lashing out, it's fear and it's anger. And if you can sometimes know that, sometimes it can just help put that attack in a little bit different framework, if that makes sense. I know I have to leave. I'm sorry. But does that make sense? I don't know if that helps, if that makes sense.
Very good.
Okay. If there are any questions, you know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
But thank you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. That was really very informative. And I do know about that because when I was going through that, I did not want my children to know what I was going through. But they kept saying, we're here for you, Mom, we're here for you. And then when I really got into the deep of chemo, I just didn't want them to be there, to see me in the state that I was in. But Dana, thank you so much again. I appreciate that. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to go to our Zoom, and we're going to have Alicia Fernandez from United Healthcare to talk to us about if you don't have any kind of insurance, please don't let that stop you from getting or receiving screening, because there should be no excuse now. That is what we're trying to do. We have so many messages for you, but we don't want you to think that you have to have screening. Please, again, get in touch with us if you have any questions, anyone, but we're going to give it to Alicia, and we thank Alicia and Panita for being there for us and answering questions. So Alicia, go right ahead.
Hi, so I did want to just mention, I missed Dana this time. I got to see her last time, but I did find EOHHS did have a caregiver support guide, so I did drop that in the chat. So if people want to refer to that document and have that resource. But always grateful to be here. Like we said, we've all been learning together. And I was driving today, and I always think I'm like the pastor doing a sermon. I sit in my car like, what am I going to talk about this evening at Mari? So one thing I wanted to touch on was we just finished renewals for Medicaid coverage. And I don't think me and Panita have really touched on this, but during COVID, nobody had to renew their Medicaid coverage. So for 2 years, systems didn't run. Everybody was just covered. So just want to make sure everybody's aware that those systems have been running now that, COVID has, as we say, ended, but the pandemics to say. So just make sure that your coverage is active. If you have any questions, that you should have received some documents to renew your coverage if you have Medicaid. But if you have any questions, you can go to Health Source Rhode Island. You can call DHS. But just to make sure your coverage is active. So if you go to pick up your medication or you go for your screening, you think, hey, I'm all set. Here's my United Healthcare card. And they're like, oh, no, you didn't do your renewal. You don't have any coverage. And then if anybody needs any guidance or assistance with that, me and Panita are always here to help with that. But as you mentioned, don't want anybody to go without getting screenings. We have so many resources. I've learned resources myself from joining these conversations that I can now provide to other people. But generally, your mammogram should be covered by your health insurance, maybe your employer coverage or commercial coverage you pay for, or your Medicaid coverage. But if you ever have any questions regarding that, feel free to reach out to me and Panita. Me and Panita are super passionate about our jobs in helping people. That's something that we're both very, very big on, and we love what we do. So if you have any questions, it doesn't matter if you don't have United Healthcare. We can point you in the right direction. We can get you the resources. If you don't have health insurance, if you're not a legal citizen, there are resources. You can go to Esperanza Hope. They help with, if you're undocumented, to be able to get screenings and different healthcare needs that you may have. So please tap into our resources. We are here to help you guys. And just to know, like, regarding even other than cancer screenings, we can help you with finding food assistance, for finding housing assistance. So, if you're someone that's receiving cancer treatment, we know agencies that can help provide you and your family meals to help the process easier for you to get through that. So just please feel free to reach out with us with any questions, or reach out to the Ministries Alliance, and they know how to get in contact with us, and we'd be more than happy to help you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you. So like she said, there's no excuse now. There is no excuse. Everyone, we're doing what we can. We're giving out resources so that you can overcome, and that you can learn. We're learning so much in these community conversations with the physicians that we have had over the few months. We're continuing on with these community conversations. We're also going to be we're transitioning into screening. If you have any questions, if you need any kind of resources, we are here to help you navigate. We are also working with the Latino community as well, and doors are just opening up for us, and we appreciate this, and we appreciate all of our community partners. Our next one, every single one, and you will see it on Facebook. We do post them. We post our flyers. Churches, I'm talking to pastors right now. Pastors, we are here. The Ministers Alliance of Rhode Island is here for you to educate your church, your congregation, your parishioners, and we're here to help you to let everyone know cancer does not have to be a death sentence, and that we can help you navigate. We're just here to be an assistance to your church community. Also, too, the next one that we have, our next community conversation, will be on Zoom. All of our community conversations are on Zoom. Just get in touch with us. We will give you all the information that is needed. But our next one is Tuesday, May 21st, I think it is, May 21st. is our next one. It's on Zoom online. You'll see it on Facebook, YouTube, and just come on and learn with us, learn with us. And then the next one that is in person is May 24th, I believe. And that is going to be at St. Elizabeth Senior Housing that is on Washington Street across from the classical high school field. So we're asking everybody, if you're interested and want to just join us, come and join us. You can contact me, myself, Pastor P, and you can go on my Facebook page. I am willing, I am open to answer any questions. Pastors, we need you. Community, we need you to spread the word about cancer. So we thank everybody. We thank well, I'm going to say it because I'm in the church atmosphere. We thank God for Kelly being with us from the Rhode Island Department of Health, who is our backbone of all of this initiative. And we just want to thank also too, thank you, Alicia and Panita from the United Healthcare, who is our backbone as well. And all of our other partners, we have Women and Infants, we have many churches, we have right here where we are, Bethel AME, Unity Chapel, Trinity Tabernacle, we have many churches. And so you want to join in, come and just get in touch with us and we can work together. So God bless you and thank you, Alicia. We have a new community health worker. Her name is Misty Harris, who is on. Misty, do you have anything to say before we close? Okay. It's okay, but you will. But we have a new part-time community health worker and we appreciate her. And she is going to help us navigate so that we can spread the word and help you. We're here to assist you in health, in better health, in better health. So God bless you and we thank you for being here and take care.